This episode is a live recording from the 2025 PLRB Claims Conference in Indianapolis, Indiana, where I hosted a panel of 3 speakers talking about the future of AI in claims. And what you're hearing is our panel discussion, including some fantastic engagement and questions from the audience. The panel is Erik, Bahnsen, Director of Industry Analytics at CCC Intelligent Solutions, Ramón Lopez, President of Claim Assist Solutions, and David S. Milton, founder and CEO of TelaClaims. And I'm your host, Bryan Falchuk, and this is the future of insurance. It's a good chance for us to come together and talk about kind of across everything that you all were sharing. It does fit together. It does tell a story of, I think there's a common thread that this isn't necessarily the future. It will go there and move to a better place and keep developing, but it's already started. So we're talking about the now and the future, but it's just the beginning. I just wonder, all of you have listened to each other as well. There are pieces that fit together, kind of the symbiotic view across the whole piece. Do you think that this is, if we say the stuff is here, do you think it's truly here? Is it not ready yet? Or are we the ones who aren't ready? What's your take on whether it's the now or the future? Erik, just since you're next to me, you have to go first.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, as I mentioned before, a lot of the challenge is just dealing with technical debt and legacy systems, I think. I mean, it's there, but you need to be able to be tapped into holistic data across the entire claim spectrum in order to make it truly, truly effective in the way it needs to be. And that can happen with certain carriers are moving a little bit faster. Maybe they carry a little bit less technical debt than others, but in general, there's a lot of legacy systems across the industry that make that challenging. So yeah, it's here. It's just a matter of being able to look at the full picture versus part of the picture, which makes it ultimately less effective until we are able to get to all of the data we need to get to.
Yeah. Ramón, what's your take?
My take is that claims adjudication, as we've known it for many decades, will be forever changed in 2025. This is the year, and there's no going back. Sure, like the how, the tech debt, the how to approach it, how the capabilities are, of course. But with companies like CCC and partners like that who can also be plugged into, maybe you do have technical debt, maybe you can't do that with your carrier CMS, but there are other ways to get at that data and to do the things that we talked about doing today. But I'll say, like, I've been in the industry for 20 years, 22 years, it's changed forever, and 2025 is that year.
And David, you also have the carrier and provider side. What's your take on where we're at? And are we the holdup? Is the technology, we meaning the industry itself, is it the technology?
Ultimately, yes. I agree, 2025, or let's call it the next, half decade. I'm a little less bullish on 2025 being the pivotal year. I think that with the speed of implementation of carriers and the size of those ships, it takes some time for them to fully engage. I think the other piece that's a little challenging, and we didn't really talk about it earlier, is the changes in the policyholder expectation. So as it relates to, is this the year for that? We are chasing a battle of policyholder expectations always increasing, coupled with our ability, and it never really ever fully catches up. So I think, are we much better this year than we were last year? Yes, sir. We were better last year than we were the year before? Yes, sir. But ultimately, I think expectations are increasing at a faster pace than the technology will imbue itself.
Yeah. I'm looking out if there are hands. Raise your hand if you have a question.
So this was a question that I had in one of the other classes or presentations. There's a lot of talk about AI and especially the use of GPT-powered solutions. One of the most glaring concerns is the privacy, data privacy, with everyone moving towards using AI, especially with claim information, sensitive claim information. How do organizations protect or account for that information going into the internet or wherever else? I know that my thought is that to really use it effectively, you have to build your own in-house, like, standalone model that learns from only the information that you put into it. But that doesn't seem to be the standard approach, because most people right now, I think, are looking at the off-the-shelf solutions that are ready to go. So what's your take on that?
Well, this is maybe one of these trade-off moments, Ramón, so you're going to have to go first. But that you're framing up, I use a public model, but all of my proprietary information, the secret sauce that makes me the carrier that I am or the solution provider that I am is now informing that model for someone else to benefit from. And all of the sensitive information specific to that claim, the claimants, the insureds, et cetera, is also going into a public model. That then is a violation of privacy. I mean, you get HIPAA laws and other laws. There's litigation. Is that public? Is it not? So now you've got that complexity. And if you don't give the information to the model, it can't give you a useful answer. But if you do, you've violated the law and other things. Is there a way to navigate this trade-off? What are the takes on this? Or do you build it yourself, but then no one here, no matter how great you are, is going to build what these hundreds of billions of dollars are pouring into. You're giving up capability to have privacy, or you're giving up privacy to have capability, and neither sounds like a great trade-off. What do we do? Ramón, you have all the answers.
No, I think you've hit the nail on the head. Like there's non-negotiables. Like I'm not gonna blur the line and get out of my contractual standards that I've agreed upon. I have to do it in a way that is private, secure, and is respectful and agreeable by the client that's using the information. So that it didn't even get past go unless you can do that. And so I think that's answer number one. I think answer number two is I think in the future too, you're going to be able to separate models that say, do we really care about wind, peril, that word? Is that really going to violate standards of security? So I think there's dimensions to what is agreeable and what can be outside in a public model versus what's outside in a private model. But I'll finish where I started at, which is there's non-negotiables. You got to commit to those standards, and you got a lot of proprietary build and time to make up to do that.
Yeah, David.
But I think it's a combination of ML and AI. So ultimately, much of the analysis and much of the things that we do are stripped from their identifying factors, and so we've got AI running on non-specific data that can the translation of a call or policy information, that's all nondescript, right? And then we have separate ML models or machine learning models that are then taking the information that we get from our AI models and then plugging that back into so that the end result is something that's within my control, which makes it customer specific. But we don't view the policy itself, the endorsements themselves, those are all public information that there's nothing proprietary about the policy. It's the deck page that's proprietary. And so we use machine learning on the deck page and AI models on the broader piece. So I think the answer, which I agree and concur, I think it's a combination of. So some of it being shop built with ML, and then we're leveraging the outside world for the non-specific data.
Erik, your whole world is subject to privacy. That's the nature of casualty claims.
That's where I was going to go with that. I mean, we're no stranger to protecting PII. I mean, that's what we've been doing the whole time. Anything we're going to do with AI, we're going to do in-house. So it's not like we're going to be pinging off of a separate external generative AI and have to deal with all those extra layers. I mean, we are building in a way that we like to be the central hub in the ecosystem, and anything we're going to build is in-house. And anything that we do, and we take, of course, those procedures very seriously and data security very seriously. Those things are going to carry over to whatever we do and are doing now.
So it's not an all or nothing answer. There are ways to navigate it, but recognizing there are non-negotiables, there are regulations, there is sensitivity that we have to respect, absolutely. And we need to make sure that what we're deploying through the various tools we use takes advantage of what's really possible. Otherwise, we're not going to get to a good outcome. And what was the point of investing in all this? But it's a tricky one to navigate, and we do have to respect it. So it's a great question.
I think really quickly, just to piggyback on that, the difference this time, and from a technology standpoint, is that all of the carriers and providers, we all recognize and is being pushed that the ability of AI is so significant that we're willing to, again, not make sacrifices, not make trade-offs on non-negotiables, but we're willing to push past those initial knee-jerk reactions because we can't not embrace that going forward. And that's the first time, again, in my 30-year career, that they're like, we don't necessarily fully understand AI, we recognize these concerns, but we've got to move in that direction. The wind is behind us finally.
My question is regarding specifically the adjuster workflows. And have you run across a situation where too much AI actually impedes effective adjuster workflows? And if you have any examples where maybe you guys, all three of you maybe have tested something where you thought might have worked, but ended up learning something very different from it?
Great question. Happy to take that. So we ran an AI model on inbound calls, both video and voice, looking to detect the sentiment of the caller, the policyholder, as to identify the direction or the sentiment that the caller had or was having, the interaction with the adjuster. And we were thrilled. We thought we were just, on to the next great thing. We're going to predict problems as they're happening in real time, escalate that claim to a supervisor, and let them jump in and get solved. We trained that model forever and ever and ever, and a lot of manpower went into it, and it was just an abject failure. Every time that the customer was like, man, you're doing a great job, the system would ping and say, there's a claim going sideways, jump in, jump in, jump in, and our supervisors would jump into the claim and go like, yeah, everything's good here, nothing to see. So I think that the granularity of what AI can ultimately accomplish is still very much on the horizon. Do I think sentimentality on video calls and reading face recognition for fraud detection, for all of those things, do I think that's where we're going? Yes, sir. Are we there yet? To my ability or our ability, we are not there yet, but I think that's where we're going. So I think we can't lose the proverbial forest for the trees.
Well, for either of the two of you, do you think that there's a cost to the adjuster and kind of their mental abilities and technical abilities here?
I think for me, it's what do I learn from some of those failures? And so for me, it's like I can auto and learn my dispatching and have an intelligent dispatching system at my fingertips, but maybe I don't know that someone went out with a baby. And so now I got to figure out what are other data elements that I got to factor in to be able to begin optimizing my model. So I don't think they're all just like total throwaways. I think you can actually sharpen your process with collecting more data. So so I don't think, no, I haven't run into that yet, but we got to continuously focus on what are the data points needed to make it a better experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's iterative. Just the same concept as implementing rules, right? The last thing you want to do is create friction or noise. So as long as you built the configurations to say, hey, this one's, we've been hammering the adjusters with this one, and then we found that they're not really, using it as much. I think about a recent example was, this is a rules example, but a trigger to send something to a nurse review would be an MRI happened on the case, right? And from a pure analytics standpoint, most of the MRIs are not supported as being medical necessary when they go to the adjuster. But we found that it's just not worth going to the mattresses over that one MRI to go to the whole nurse review. If it's going to have other things that are questionable later, steroid injections or surgical treatment, all those things, like then it makes more sense. But it's just not worth going to the mattresses over the MRIs because there's a lot of those. And you want to argue that one, argue it on reasonable price. So that was just an example of, hey, that one got noisy, make an adjustment. So I think it's just going to carry over to AI.
I do wonder about, I said this to someone earlier today, I don't know anybody's phone number. Your phone number is like 3 movements of my thumb and then a tap. Directions, right? We don't know our way around. I still don't understand how I drove in places I didn't go every day in the past, MapQuest or even actual physical maps. And is this the same thing? Are we talking about tools that, it feels different. We're not talking about tools that take the thinking out of it so that a person is just sort of blindly, I'm turning where it said to turn, or I'm swiping 3 times and tapping rather than knowing your phone number. It feels like it's sort of the inverse of that, is the AI is doing the not necessarily mindless, but the more repetitive and the things I could never do if I had the time and the knowledge and everything, I still couldn't get there. I'm left to focus on the true expertise edition. It's not, when I hear people sort of afraid it's going to be like navigating around in the car, it feels like in practice it's actually the opposite of that. It's letting us use more of our brain power effectively rather than burning it out on the procedural or a wild goose chase for some bias we could never figure out ourselves. Is that what resonates for you? And maybe that's a bit to this question, is like, is it the inverse of what has all happened to us from our smartphones making us dumb? Or does it stand to bring that risk?
We call that core versus non-core work.
Okay.
So Yeah, we want them to be focusing on the things that we're actually paying them for, their expertise to make the key decisions and to inject the empathy, right? The things that AI can't do. AI can handle a lot of the other things that otherwise would churn a lot of hours. So they're, a lot of work and not a lot of benefit out of those things. So again, core versus non-core work, same kind of concept.
To me, how I think about it is you have to listen to signals. And so there are signals within your business that you have never heard today. And when you can listen to those signals, and it may be that you are replacing 30-year shingles in San Antonio, Texas, 75% of the time, and you may have never known that level of detail. Now start listening to those signals and say, well, what weather events happened? What correlations can I make from, like, how do I more effectively with sophistication run the business better? And that is the goal for me. Like, I look at the aggregate of what we're showing you all today. It's like, wow, we can make better choices that have large financial, consequences and sharpen where we can sharpen. So to me, I just look at it like there's just ways to be far more accurate in what you're intending to do. And look, certain clients, like, number one thing is service. And so you can now start turning dials to say, like, I'm going to turn dials so that I see that home within this amount of days. They get this many phone calls, this many touches. I've put my arms around this policyholder because that's what that specific client wants to differentiate on. Versus the next one wants to differentiate on paying what you owe. And there's an accuracy, and that's the number one thing. Now I have the dials to be able to really zero in on how to do that with sophistication. To me, that's where I think the game changer truly is, rather than just broadly adjusting the same way.
I used to say for years when talking to a client, we have three things on the table: speed, accuracy, or price. Pick two. And I think AI is sort of starting to make that question obsolete now because of the efficiencies, to your point, that it is taking off many of the repetitive tasks, the mundane, administrative, task. We got beat into our heads, if it's not in the file, it didn't happen, right?
Yeah.
Well, now the things are happening sort of in the claim file, so we don't have to spend the time documenting the things that have happened. So I think it's just moving towards better large data to make decisions from, but on the individual claim level, strip out the tedium and let's spend time with the adjusters making the decisions.
Yeah, another question.
I know we talked a lot about the capabilities that we have today. I guess in the next 10 years, what are your thoughts on where we will be? Because it's a little bit of a hot topic. I know the World Economic Forum had claims adjusters as the 12th most declining profession. So what are your thoughts on that for the next 10 years?
I think a couple specific examples maybe. I think the barrier of entry and the skill set needed to climb a roof is going to continuously lower. I think the barriers are going to lower, and all the tools and technology, whether it's object identification from a drone or it's scanning a room for measurements, I think that you're going to open the door larger for more people to be able to come in and do this job. So I do think that I see that as one of the biggest kind of technology impacts or influences in the next 10 years. As opposed to it was a certain type of archetype that was going to be a field adjuster, and you can kind of spot them a mile away. I think the barrier of entry is going to change. Well,
we get hyper specialization now, and AI affords the claim process to be segmented, to be bifurcated from the inspection, whether it be the adjuster or an inspector, or the quality of imagery we get back, the data points that we get back to make claims decisions. And so I think we're going to see this sort of hyper specialization in the claims process, but because of technology, AI and the like, machine learning and the like, it will feel seamless to the policyholder. It will feel like a seamless experience. And so, a decade out, I don't know that, the short answer is, I don't know that we'll have a guy even climb the roof in 10 years, right? I think with as quickly as technology is evolving, I think that, we won't have to have someone review the policy to, make the decision, is there coverage for this loss? We'll know that. This is a covered loss. Now let's worry about quantum rather than coverage and this and that. So I think it's just going to continue to evolve from hyper-specialization, refining those models, taking the noise out of the process so that the adjusters are spending their time. I think we are a long way away from AI going, that roof needs to be replaced effectively and consistently across the board. I think that some people talk about that. I think it's kind of sexy to talk about, but I want a set of eyes on something to say that needs to be replaced, or this medical procedure is prudent. I don't want AI making that decision for quite some time, even a decade out, I guess I would say.
Charlie, really hard not to get over my skis on this one, but I think agentic AI is going to be where it's at in the next couple of years. Everyone familiar with agentic AI, where the AI is not just being your passive co-pilot, it's actually going to take action on things, right? I'll give you a casualty-specific example. A non-represented injury claim, right? So you have a couple of bills floating around from a hospital, you settle a case with somebody, and the agentic AI is going to go out and move to a clearinghouse and actually negotiate those medical bills on your behalf within parameters that you've given it. So you may have some back and forth, and it's going to auto accept or auto counter offer. I think that we're going to get to the earlier stages of this. We're going to test it. It's going to be iterative. But I really do think the agentic AI is where things will go, not just in the insurance world, but all the other world that we're seeing AI. You're going to have your own AI co-pilot doing things for you that you didn't have now.
There's a few agentic AI solutions in the expo hall. And Ramón, I think to your point on 2025 is these are things that are here now. Whether it's the majority will be done by that, I don't think anyone's saying that, but the solutions are already available. Not even starting to be, but already available. And they will change and grow and develop. But yeah, there are already examples of that live in claims today.
And tested. I mean, not theoretical. I mean, tested, live, working, providing service, providing value today.
Non-pilot proof of concept, full
That's
commercial
right.
deployment.
That's right.
Yeah.
Writing letters.
Yeah.
Assigning adjusters.
Yeah.
Things that happen now.
Who is not afraid of AI taking their job? Okay. Who is? You can be both. Yeah. So hang on to the why you are, and we're going to go to this question first, and then I want to come back to some of those folks who had their hand raised and hear some of what drives the concern and see if there's something we can learn and pick apart in that. But yeah, please.
Sure.
Next question.
Well, that you were just discussing about, he's talking about roofs, he's talking about low severity, low amount situation. That's something that will be hard to crossover. You're always going to want to have a set of eyes on a $100,000 situation versus a $5,000 situation. I don't think we're, as he said, as David said, a roof situation, it's at least a $30,000 situation. You're going to have a set of eyes looking at that roof, making the decision. And on the topic of making decisions, since everything goes to the file, when you have litigated files, everything can be seen. What happens when you have AI making a decision that you as an insurance company don't agree with, but it's in the file? Why are you going against the AI? You're being asked that on trial because it goes against the interest of the insured. It goes well for the insurance company.
I think guardrails. I think AI is the next iteration of machine learning. No one argues that machine learning on a model can't do various tasks within a certain set of guardrails. So AI is not a product or a process that is going to be unleashed upon the world. AI is, again, a tool that will operate within those guidelines. So you brought up $5,000 versus $100,000. Those are all guidelines, right? Okay, I'm willing to let AI assist in helping me make a $5,000 decision, maybe have more suggestion on that. But once it gets above a certain threshold, I want it always to go this path. Those are just rules and processes that are set up within the process.
Well, and to piggyback on that, David, like for the roof, okay, so let's use a roof example, $30,000 roof. If I have softball size hail in DFW, and I can, with the fact, know that that's the case within minutes of it happening, I don't know if I need someone to put eyes on that roof.
Yeah.
I think there's dimensions and there's certain types of claims and certain types of things that you can apply a lot of technology to. But I always say, like, it's not across the entire board. It's not zeros and ones. It's not black and white. But there are certain types of characters that we don't really need to be doing that anymore.
I think the dollar-based segmentation is what we had to do because we couldn't do better. Mm-hmm. And I ran a claims team for years. We had our basic segmentation that was like over this threshold, it's this and over, but we also said you can have $1 million claim that is actually really basic, and it doesn't have to go to your top, it will need to for authority for approval of the payment, but beyond that, it's actually not a complex claim. And you have a $20,000 claim that is incredibly complex and very easily could be a $5 million claim if it's mishandled. So I think the point with AI is we don't need to use the overly simplified segmentation and decisioning because there's so much more to it that the AI can handle in a way that a person couldn't or an Excel spreadsheet couldn't, because there's only so many if statements you can write in there. Mm-hmm. And it overcomes a lot of the biases that we have as we look at these things to miss the point of there's a jumper in that claim pile that we're not seeing yet that could become severe, but we segmented in a simplistic way and missed it. Right, to your point on the roof. Yeah, Erik,
I mean, there's situations that make sense for auto approve and ones that don't. I mean, the ones where, I mean, it's a little bit dicier, right? There's some recent headlines in the media about things that were auto approved or auto denied, and they had to do with people's, medical treatment and care and coverage for those things, and that's a whole different level, and that should be treated with, a different level of care than whether I'm going to auto approve a $2,000 auto estimate or a roof repair or something like that. So, I'm always of a measure 3 times, cut once, than to move fast and break things philosophically. So I think you just apply that.
But predictive analytics too, right? I mean, AI gives us the ability of setting the model up in a way that we're using predictive analytics to, the last 3,000 claims we didn't realize, but if this phrase was used or this condition or that condition, the claim went sideways. And so in the sea of data of claims, without AI, we'd never find that trigger. So it's to Ramón's point earlier, it's finding those triggers to then make business decisions upon. That is still AI, even though it's not necessarily a ChatGPT interface. It's still AI.
Well, just a good point you made that if we don't follow the AI, that could be, and it had a different view, that could be used against us. By the same token, if we follow the AI and it has a different view from what the other side wants, it can be used against us. If we follow what Coverage Counsel says, that can be used against us. If we follow the opposite of what they say, that can be, I mean, any of these things. If you don't. Yeah, I mean, we were putting in place standard policies and procedures on how to handle claims, and one of the claims managers was like, I don't think we should document this because that could be used against us in court if we didn't follow it. And I said, right. And they could also say, why don't you have policies and procedures for this situation? And you were, it was the Wild West. And I don't know which is more or less likely to happen, but I think whichever isn't what we did is what would be used against us because they're trying to find something in that case. Either way, you got to have your rules. You have to have your logic and your rationale clarified, whether it's AI, someone more experienced, less experienced, whatever.
Florida was a prime example of that. Florida passed a law that said the claims manuals must be published, and there was great consternation within many insurance carriers in Florida trying to decide the level of granularity to be published in claims manuals. And so I think a few carriers ended up with a 3-page claim manual that says get claim, call customer, solve claim.
Yep.
So I think the intended result of that well-meaning law had adverse effects. I think, to your point.
All right, where were the people who had, you were on both sides of the fence, right? Can we give him the mic? Do you mind sharing a little bit about why you are and are not?
Well, I guess it just depends on, I guess the aspect of the job. Like I was having some conversations earlier today where even we were talking about, let's say the reception of it from insureds too. Let's say you have an elderly client, you try to send them a text from some of these models, they're like, hey, we don't do text. They might want someone in your home. So to that effect, I'm like, hey, I feel very secure. But to the other effect where you have applications like drones that can identify storm damage. So yeah, very much on the fence. I guess it could go, either way to that point.
And we had someone else another point of concern around that.
Yeah, hello. I've been in the adjusting field for forever, it seems. I'm one of the old timers as well, and background in management with insurance companies. Now I'm on the vendor side of the house, and my company is the art of negotiation. We negotiate construction contracts, or we mitigation invoices, or asbestos abatement invoices for carriers with service providers. And what I'm hearing is, all these algorithms and everything you can do with AI is going to take a large chunk of my business away. And that's the impact AI is going to have on companies such as mine. So it worries me.
It's another perspective on I think that adjuster fear, right?
No, I think it's a great perspective. My response would be, I've been around, when we used chisel and slate to write our first estimates, right? And there was a great amount of freedom that came with that, a great amount of responsibility. And then came, obviously all of the scrubbing models, and all the adjusters were aflutter because now there was a bot that was sitting on top of your estimating system that would point out discrepancies and overages and identify, any area for improvement. That was, the big brother coming down to take our expertise. And then we quickly found that, all of our carriers and all of our partners just said, look, as long as it's justified, put a note, let's move on. And everybody's sort of temperature fell, and everything was fine. I think if you're doing the right thing and you're putting the work in, I don't think there's ever a concern about AI coming in and replacing things. And I think that the art of negotiating a disputed claim, whether it's a peer review or a building build back or whatever it may be, there'll be AI tools that'll say, hey, we've identified these areas. We do that now. We run peer review claims through AI and say, hey, look at the square footages, look at the metrics, look at the math, if you will, of this claim, and tell me where the overlap is, the overages are. Tell me where the excesses are. That's using AI to not settle the claim, but just to do the math for me, because it's a whole lot easier for them to do the math than me to pull out a pen and paper and do the math on cubic square feet. So yeah. I think that the concern that AI is going to replace that, I hear you. I just think that it will help assist you become better at your job rather than take those files away from you. And quite frankly, I'm sorry to run long, but to finish that, I think that the carriers who are willing to say, we are turning off the human element of this and relying over to the machine world to do this, I don't think you're going to find that very, very often. I just don't think, I can imagine replacing that.
Well, from either of you.
In my world, we haven't gotten to the point where there's agentic bots negotiating plaintiff and attorney versus adjuster negotiations. I don't see that anytime soon. I'm a data person, as I mentioned earlier. I'm pretty agnostic about pro versus technology versus negative or bearish on technology. But historically, whenever we had big paradigm shifts like this, usually when one door closes, two more open, or there's some sort of a trade-off between that. So that's all I can say, at least historically. I don't know that this is the one exception where this is the one time where doors don't open on the other side of that as well. The pipeline for jobs across the insurance spectrum, at least from everything that I read, seems pretty healthy going in the near future. So I'll take at least an optimistic note on that one.
Ramón, David.
No, I think the brain drain that we've had in the insurance industry as a whole, based on generational gaps, I think that this will allow that to be backfilled a little bit, and with the data and the analysis that we get with AI and all the tooling, I think that the cream rising to the top will be more obvious than ever. But the jobs aren't going away.
Anything you'd add, Ramón? Yeah.
No, sir, for your specific circumstance, I think that one is probably farther away, because when it gets to your desk, there's a lot of complexities that are involved, and I don't see that specific example being one that's going to be removed anytime soon. For yours, maybe it's field estimating, maybe it's the field you're in. Yeah, I think there's going to be a portion of claims that will no longer require people to go on the roof anymore. But I don't think that in any strategy I've seen, I don't think anyone's saying we got to reduce the field footprint by 20%. I think the ones, it's going to allow you to get on the ones you need to get on, and really hone in and get smart and get to the right call on that, versus going to a place where you even shouldn't be.
Yeah. Well, there were two hands that I thought would go up for this. That's one of them, Beth. And David, you're the other one. So Beth and David on our coverage legal team, because Ramón, you showed the policy form and said, is this covered? Yes, it's covered. No, it's not. Coverage attorneys, this is their world.
That's
but you
what
didn't
I was
raise your
say.
hand, and so I want to hear
I
from
told
you.
Brennan I was ready for a question, but I was letting him go.
Yeah, no, please.
So the thoughts that were coming to me, everybody kind of thinks about their own little, kind of world that they work in, whether you're investigating the claim, negotiating, and you mentioned about, locating the right adjuster for the claim. But when we get to the coverage part about it, you mentioned, you put it in and, it says, oh yes, well, it's covered. But what is the bucket of information that you envision that it's drawing from to come up with that conclusion? And then, as David had pointed out, that, the deck sheets, that's proprietary information. That's, going to be machine learning, but that's not, you're not using that particular information from the deck sheet to go into an open AI type of system. So what is it that you envision pulling from in order to come up with a coverage type of determination or help in your coverage determination?
Yeah, without getting into too much of the details here, I'd say training large language models specifically for our industry is not hard. Like, there's only a few ways you can say wet, mold, algae, fungus, and being able to train our models based on the specific discipline we all are in, that's not a complex problem to solve. And so you can train your large language models with fairly simple, word analytics to be able to do this stuff. And so I think it's actually fairly easy because our discipline is we're not looking to boil the ocean. Like, it's very specific to insurance. In our situation, maybe it's property insurance. You can get at those models fairly simply.
Anyone else? I've got stuff to add to it, but
Coverage disputes, I was unaware that those existed. I mean, the policy is pretty clear. This is covered, this is not covered. But I think to expand on what he's saying, I agree. The policy form is nondescript. I mean, every HO3 from this provider with this edition date, we know that information. So that's, part of what's ingested by AI without the specific policy information. And then from a machine learning standpoint, we now take that knowledge base and apply it. Okay, they do have this endorsement, this coverage. And so I think it is just the large language models to the known policy jacket that is modified specifically the endorsement for that particular insured. So I'm not asking on our side, we're not asking, in a general ISO HO3 is a, tree on a driveway covered. We're asking for this policy, is a tree on the driveway covered? Using that specific HO3 for that carrier with that edition date. On our side, we use the natural language models that have been trained what to reference. Yeah. They reference those for decisions, and then we apply the proprietary information on top of that.
From our perspective at PLRB and the work that Beth's team does, and David here from the team as well, we look at this, and I think the same story would be true if you're a coverage attorney, doing work for the industry. There's sort of two orders of things. I think to the insureds, it's like, what do you mean you don't know if it's covered or not? Once you get into claims, you understand that's actually not an easy thing to answer, but there is absolutely a population of claims where it can be determined and the models can be trained and it's clear. And then you add in the nuances of evolving regulation, case law, these things move. Can models keep up with that? Yes, to an extent, and sometimes they haven't sorted themselves out yet, not the models, but the laws and the case law, the regs, and someone has to make sense. At times, policy may be written in such a way that there's internal conflict, and you need to look at that and the case law and other things going on that a model may not be ready to do yet. And so that's again where the expert comes in. But I think back to the models, those models learn by that expert work. So even if the expert analysis that humans continue to do is to then feed the models so they can do better on everything else, that still supports the work of those expert individuals too. And I don't know anyone who's twiddling their thumbs at coverage firms, at PLRB either, so we're all busy enough. But I think there's, in recognizing what it takes to train a model and keep it up to date in a space where the laws are changing and the situations are changing, the plaintiffs' attorneys are doing things differently, you need to keep feeding those models with new analysis and intelligence. And so I think it's a change in what maybe the context of that work exactly is for those experts, but work around that continues on, even if it's to have this corpus of knowledge that's keeping up with the evolving world. And I think for your role, for others, that story may exist too. So again, it's when we hear like it won't take your job, but it will change it. I think this is a nice example of that. And I'm not just trying to make my team feel better about the world. I think it's a legitimate point that I feel like there's others in this room that are probably feeling. We are tight on time, but I do want to get to your question. So Brennan, we'll make that the last question.
Hi, so my question comes down to how AI would address, we like to say some claims are kind of cut and dry, but the personality of the actual policyholder sometimes comes into play with a coverage determination. Mm-hmm. Say you have a mold claim in a home with a contractor that lives there that he's well aware of it and let this go and get out of control, but then you also have the same exact claim with an elderly insured that may not have been aware of the issue. And then it really comes into a business call. How does AI come into play in that kind of situation?
I guess, do you mean in the entire life cycle of both those claims? Are you saying like how does it come to play from beginning to end, or?
I mean, yeah, when you're saying you're making the coverage determination, a lot of the times those things come into, you have to take in not necessarily just the facts of the claim, but you have to take in the facts of the policyholder itself. This person's been with us for 10 years, they've never filed a claim, they're elderly, or as opposed to the other insured who's had 10 claims and is probably being fraudulent in their reporting of loss. So when it comes from AI, how does AI work with taking in those external factors?
Kind of how I want to address that is, number one, and I want to make sure we emphasize this, like there are certain elements and there are certain claim types that probably wouldn't be best done in that space. And so to your specific example, I could see where the policyholder takes photos of their damage and your photo identification and your AI models used to say what is trained to be rot versus what's not rot. I think you would get signals sent to you and that would signal the adjuster. At that point, they're going to say, I need to send someone out. So I think you could play in that space. And my take on it is like, we're going to get way more educated about the characteristics of every type of claim. We've kind of broadly handled claims to the best of our ability. But there's going to be all types of new signals that we're going to be like, this is why I think there's probably not a labor force that's going to shrink, because I think we're going to find there's a lot more stuff out there that we've just never known before. But I can see image detection being a part of that. It's also depending on the experience that the carrier wants to deliver to their policyholder. Like if the carrier makes a strategic decision that, broadly speaking, someone who's this age and older, I'm going to send someone out to every one of those types of claims. If it's a water loss, if it's, I know more about this person. So I think you could aggregate that information, you can surface it up, and you can auto dispatch field people to make sure that they are sitting down with that specific type of individual and having the right level of conversation with them.
I think 10 years ago, I don't know that you could ubiquitously say that every carrier within their system on the deck sheet or communicates the age of a roof, right? I don't, 10 years ago, it was you'd have to dig for it and dig through 15 inspections to get that information. And now, almost every system that we are exposed to has got a data field for roof age. So we now, as adjusters, walk into that claim with a ton more confidence. And so I know that's a separate example to what you were saying, but I think that AI helps us generate data points. And from those data points, we then, humans, make the best decision that we can based on the information that we're provided. So if AI can look at your contractor, our nefarious contractor who's had 10 claims over the last 3 years, and instead of waiting to get the ISO report that lists all those out, the system is keeping up with that sort of stuff in real time. And so even from the FNOL, we're asking better questions. We're drilling into, the caution light is flashing early on because of AI. It helps us ask better questions that get better data to make better decisions.
Yeah.
And so that's where, I think we're all driving.
Yeah. And I think back to the coverage question too, like every one of these, the human still is in the loop. Like it's not just a broadly like this is the coverage assessment, make the call, pay the claim, don't pay the claim. It's I look at it. I'm just a simple person. Like back in my old claim manual, I had bookmarks on things like mold and those kind of things. And what I'm doing that, I'm just surfacing up those bookmarks with new technology in different ways to make me faster and more accurate at what I'm ultimately going to make the call on.
Yeah, I like the idea of just pushing maybe those specific examples as exception handling, right? Because I mean, one person's sort of almost an insider of knowing the way things work, and the other one, I mean, maybe it just becomes anyone over the age of X. We don't send through that normal kind of happy path or the more automated path, right? Like, I'll tell you what, if somebody rear-ends me on the highway and I have to have minor injury claim, like, I'm going to be an insider. Like, I mean, I had to take my infant years ago to one of those fly-by-night health emergency places, and, you know, I got a $4,000 bill for them to give him a couple of Motrin. You better believe I tore him up when I got the bill. So I'm an insider. Like, I wouldn't be part of the happy path on that one.
Yeah. Yeah, there are flags and signals that we can be mindful of. And again, we can overly simplify them to our detriment or not. And we have tools that are allowing us to be more contextually aware and discerning in how we apply it versus, I think, you know, traditionally is like, if you see this, automatically do that. It's, well, maybe not. The age one is a great one. I worked for an insurtech that was in the communication space, and their presumption is over a certain age, they don't want to text. And then we had a hurricane in Florida, and what we found is actually, it's like a barbell. The older customers absolutely wanted to text, and the younger customers wanted to text, and it was the fool. Yeah, and I was one of the middle people. I wasn't in Florida, but I said to someone, I was like, I'm not a teenage kid. Like, I don't text. I do now, so now I'm a teenage kid. But it was this misperception that if you're older, you're not going to do it. And well, might have been true before, and it could be true today, but we're overly simplifying how we're drawing those lines. And we don't have to do that now. And then maybe we can apply some of these tools more intelligently and less biased.
Meet them where they are. That's still the end of the game.
Yeah. Well, it's great. We're about 30 seconds over, so we'll stop there. Thank you to the three of you for presenting. Thank you for the questions. Put some of you on the spot. I love that. Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of the day.